might make hybrids of these. But my point is, I mean, it's something we have to tell every board. Community involvement takes a lot of time and energy, and that's what we're here for our part. But you have to have the willingness as a board to really want to do this before you do community involvement. Now, Dr. Payne and I have talked about this a little bit, so you need to make him a recommendation on how you want, if you want to do this and how you want to go about doing it. So that's one thing you'll need to recommend to him. I don't think he's averse to it, rather frankly. I think he thinks it's a good idea, actually. But again, you have to be comfortable. Now, I do want to ask some questions now at this point. What do you think about community involvement, community involvement days? Again, I told you about the board that said no thanks, and they're doing quite well. I mean, they have a good tenure of their superintendent. It's not really about the tenure of your superintendent. It's about building trust. You got people buying into the process in your communities. It's about getting input from your communities. It's about finding what's on people's minds about the superintendency, which they'll have, they will express that. And so it's those sort of things. It's not really about longevity or tenure. It's about those sort of things. So you see any flaws in this? I'll just be honest. Any flaws in community involvement?
Personally, I prefer that. I'd like to know what the community has on its mind and share that with us as a part of the process.
Yeah,
I don't know the particulars of it, but I'd like to know
and
how
you all
they
can
feel.
settle on these once we, if you want to do this, you can settle on the one you want to do. I have a bias for it. I like the community forum. It's structured. It's, you get anyone out who wants to come out, and they come out to a meeting, and they have to give you their questions in advance. It's not a debate. It's not who's on first. It's not anything like that. It's a real structured process, and it seems to work pretty well. Again, we do the structuring and have to make sure that it's pretty well done, but I think.
Well, I'm sure we all have our perspective on things,
Yeah.
but we don't necessarily know what the community's perspective
Yeah.
are on things.
And that's what happened in Ohio County.
Yeah.
And that was very valuable for their board, because once they got this report here, and this is not the full report, then they gave it to their superintendent and said, here's some things you may want to work on.
Right, exactly.
So that's something that came out of the focus group. I do have a bias. I don't recommend focus groups. I think they're too tightly structured. I think getting just people who want to come out and show interest in things like that is a good way of doing it. Of course, there's one caveat there. If you're organized, then you'll send people out. Okay, you know what I'm saying? We know all of that. We're talking within ourselves. So, yeah.
I think it's be very valuable to have public input on any issue.
Mhm.
I just want to be sure that we give a wide variety of public input.
Yes.
And that's sort of what you were referring to.
That is exactly right,
I mean,
because
always the most vocal person is not, maybe not, he may have the only opinion, that
Right.
only opinion. So, I mean, I would be concerned with some process that we could ensure that we would get lots of, and I don't know what that would be, but I mean, a lot of variety of ideas or,
Right.
you know, we're in.
and you may want to do two things. You may want to have an open meeting where anybody who wants to come before the school board simply says, you give them a little, like an open mic, basically, and anybody who wants to come before the school board at a certain time in this process can do so. And invite your teacher groups and your professional groups in particular, your service personnel, teachers, and those groups. And then you may want to do like a forum where you invite the whole community. And I don't know how your community is sectored. I don't think that's good. Actually, it ought to be in one central location. I was thinking you might have it in two different parts of your county, but I don't think that's a good idea. We've never done that before. We've always had it in it. Doesn't have to be at the board office. Doesn't have to. It can be in any kind of a good neutral setting. Would be good. It could be in the board office, but I think, or I know Wood County, they took one of theirs to Parkersburg South. That's where they did theirs.
Well, we have our one high school
So you
here,
have
and
to
I
like,
feel like,
yeah, that'd be a good place to do that, I think, or you can have another site, so. But think about that when you get into some of your own internal thinking about this, about where you'd like to have it, if you want to do that. Again, I stress the importance of that. The next part is like structured interviews. The best interviews of board candidates for superintendent are done by structured interviews, and you all know all this, you probably do this anyway. What you do is you simply have, each board member gets 2 questions, and then you have a 45-minute interview period. The candidate they budget their own time. If Howard O'Cole wants to talk 30 minutes in his introduction, he better speak through the next 15 minutes. So anyway, they budget their own time, they make an introductory statement, they answer questions, 10 questions, then they make a closing statement. Then you have 15 minutes for free ranging questions. In other words, somebody may come from Meigs County, Ohio, and you may say, well, you know, Ohio governance of schools and superintendents are so different. How do you think you'll adapt to West Virginia with our very centralized school system, or something like that? In other words, unique type questions for an individual, and there's about 15-minute leeway for that. Or someone may say something and you want to follow up. Then you do the follow-up during that 15-minute period. So literally, you have an hour for each interview. Sometimes people will answer questions extremely concisely. Like one of the interviews in Wood County, they had 45 minutes and they were done in 25 minutes because the person was very concise. They didn't speak fast like me, they were just concise. So they had 20 more minutes, but the board didn't want that. So anyway, what I'm saying is they budget their own time and you have structured interview type questions. Next thing is you do a little assessment here of how you feel about the candidates, how they were prepared or everything. Now let's talk about this. This is under tab number 8. When you do the citizen part, then what we'll do is, typically the citizen part is done on a Saturday in the morning. And then in the afternoon, you interview the candidates. So if you have 3 candidates, maybe at 9 o'clock you have one interview with the citizen group, 10 o'clock you have one interview, 11 o'clock, then they come to you about 1 p.m. and you work through the afternoon in the same order they were interviewed in the morning, or however your citizen process is. Then we collect that data. And once we collect the data, then typically you would meet on the following Monday. It's on Saturday, you would meet on that following Monday. And you would talk about what your impression of the candidates were that you interviewed. And then at the conclusion of that, we give the board president the results of the citizen group interviews. So you have that data not in advance, but after you've had your own discussions to see if your thinking is connected to or somehow jives with that of the community. I think that's an important consideration, because what happens is, if you don't do that, then some boards may be, I don't know that you would be deliberately influenced by the citizen questions or responses, but you could be, so we kind of manage it that way. So that's what you do with those sort of things. And indeed, that's how the board, you would do the assessment of the candidates that we had in Mason County. You see how they did that. Again, that's not a high-tech model. That's only to get the discussion going, because when you're discussing the superintendent position, then you'll get into a lot of other detail as well. And then the last thing is timeline. And I'd like to come back to your board once you declare the position vacant and you're getting ready to sit, to put it, to get the notice out to the public, or to all the people we notice it to. I'd like to come back to your board and I'd like to do a timeline of when you're going to start and when you will finish. Let's just talk about that briefly. If you get everything worked out as far as what you want to put in the notice position vacancy, we do the advertising. It's essentially done by us, the format for the ad, unless you want something else put in it. Then once you get that done, let's say you get that done by the 22nd day of March, which is totally within the framework, then I would say